you can understand even more so why he would want to step away and not focus on fighting or defending his title, because obviously there's a lot going on. It's extremely sad.
The news of his exit might...
The MMA world just got turned upside down when Ilia Topuria, the unbeaten champion holding 2 titles, officially announced he's stepping back from his UFC lightweight championship defense.
Some news regarding Ilia Topuria, because I do think that as of this morning, it's probably the biggest news of the day. So obviously by now you know that he is not fighting on January 24th.
What I'm about to reveal is absolutely earth-shattering, and the real story behind his decision is going to break your heart. This is hands down the most dramatic champion collapse we've ever witnessed in UFC history. What began as quiet speculation has blown up into the most shocking MMA story of the year. Even Ariel Helwani confirmed this is the biggest thing happening in combat sports right now.
So over the past several weeks, I've made the difficult decision to temporarily step away from defending my title. This was not a decision I took lightly. However, when circumstances arise that threaten your personal integrity, your family, and your reputation, there comes a point when you must address them directly. In recent months, I have been subjected to severe and unacceptable pressure, including threats to disseminate false allegations of domestic abuse unless financial demands were met. These allegations are entirely unfounded. The truth is not a matter of opinion, it is a matter of evidence.
Back on November 27, 2025, Topuria dropped a bombshell on social media that instantly rocked the entire fighting community. His message was crystal clear but left everyone with more questions than answers. He simply said he wouldn't compete in early 2026 because he was dealing with serious personal issues and needed to prioritize his kids above everything else. Nobody had any clue about the nightmare unfolding behind the scenes. The MMA community went wild with theories. Some figured it was championship pressure finally getting to him. Others suspected UFC contract drama, but the reality turned out to be way worse than anyone could have imagined. Max Holloway, the same fighter Topuria had brutally finished during his featherweight dominance, immediately showed support with a telling message about protecting children and understanding the struggle firsthand. Those words hinted at something much darker than a simple break or injury. Then December 15, 2025 arrived, and everything exploded. Topuria released a statement that revealed the horrifying truth behind his absence. Ariel Helwani read the entire thing on his show, and every word was absolutely crucial.
So that is heavy-duty stuff. Obviously, we knew that he was going through some personal issues, and there's rumors online, and I didn't want to partake in any of those. I had not heard any of this. I had not heard any of these allegations or rumors, innuendo, any of that. And so you can understand even more so why he would want to step away and not focus on fighting or defending his title, because obviously there's a lot going on. It's extremely sad. It's, I feel for everyone involved. I feel for his family. I feel for his kids. It's an awful situation.
Here's what Topuria is claiming, and this is where things get really serious. He says he's been targeted by someone trying to extort him with threats of spreading fake domestic abuse accusations unless he pays massive amounts of money. This nightmare coincides perfectly with his messy separation and custody fight with his ex-wife, Georgina. Reports show their relationship completely fell apart in late 2025, with both sides unfollowing each other on social media, deleting photos, and getting into what Spanish outlets describe as a bitter divorce battle over money and custody. When you see everything Topuria is dealing with simultaneously, his decision to step away makes perfect sense. Helwani captured just how serious this situation really is.
My initial decision to remain silent was made solely to protect my children, who are the most important part of my life. However, I've come to understand that silence under these circumstances does not protect the truth. It allows false narratives to take hold. Many individuals have faced similar situations, and time and again, the legal system has ultimately clarified the facts. Today, I'm stepping forward, not only for my family and myself, but also to demonstrate that no one should be forced to yield to intimidation.
The couple's public split started showing around October 6, 2025, when both Topuria and Georgina wiped their joint photos from Instagram. 7 days later, Georgina posted something really telling on her Instagram about a mother's superpower being the ability to create a safe world for her daughter to grow up fearless. By November 10th, word got out that Georgina had officially filed for divorce, reportedly going after half of everything Topuria owns. 2 days after that, Cheating allegations surfaced when Georgina allegedly told Spanish media the breakup happened because Topuria was contacting other women. This is where everything gets even messier. In his December 15th statement, Topuria explained he's been building a case to defend himself. He claims he's collected mountains of evidence, including recorded conversations, written messages, witness testimony, and video footage. All of this documentation has already been turned over to Spanish authorities to file charges for extortion attempts, evidence tampering, money theft, and multiple threats. Topuria also explained why he initially stayed quiet about this whole mess and what finally pushed him to speak publicly.
Well, I got something for you. This called the Wife Beater Special. That's right. I got my wife beater on for Ilia Topuria. That puts his hands on a woman. You know, I grew up without a dad. You know, never seen my dad, never will see my dad. And you know what? I'd rather not see my dad than have my dad there beating on my mom. Let me tell you something, that'll get you killed around these parts, son.
The MMA world's reaction has been immediate and completely split down the middle. Some fighters are backing Topuria as a victim fighting against blackmail. Others are skeptical about the timing of his announcement right in the middle of divorce proceedings. Bryce Mitchell jumped in immediately, taking Topuria's ex-wife's side and launching a brutal verbal assault.
I think a lot of people were surprised that you were not fighting in the first quarter, at least. But how is it with the UFC? Are they understanding? Because obviously all the fighters can go through problems such as what you are going through. How understanding was Hunter and the other people involved? The truth is, Ilia says, they have been excellent. We have a special connection. I have understanding without having to give a lot of explanation, understanding from them. From the very first moment, they have extended their hand. I have been offered their support in any time I needed it. So I don't really know. I'm very happy for the support I've received from them, for the understanding.
Mitchell even challenged Topuria's brother Alejandro to fight him at bantamweight. But while guys like Mitchell are busy judging on social media, the UFC has to figure out what to do with their lightweight division that's now in total chaos.
You do wonder, at some point, will they decide to make that interim belt the actual belt if he's not going to come back anytime soon? I don't think that they're going to be forced to do that for the January event. We'll see what kind of timeline he's on, how long this is going to play out. But if it's by next summer, perhaps they make that call.
The timeline here?
The UFC has actually been incredibly supportive through this whole ordeal, according to Topuria himself. He's praised Hunter Campbell and the entire UFC leadership for how they've handled this situation.
So basically, Topuria says, I'm going to spoil the UFC's plans, which Justin Gaethje has acknowledged the fact the UFC clearly wants Topuria versus Paddy. And Topuria basically says, oh, well, I'm probably not fighting Justin Gaethje if he wins. Look at that. If Justin Gaethje wins, the subtitles are kind of covered up here, the UFC has different plans. Watch that again. Watch that again. I know most of you don't speak Spanish. But if Justin Gaethje wins, the UFC has different plans.
But everyone in MMA is asking the same question right now. What happens to the lightweight title while Topuria handles these legal and personal battles? The UFC moved fast with their answer. They announced an interim lightweight championship between Justin Gaethje and Paddy Pimblett at UFC 34 on January 24th, 2026 in Las Vegas. This decision has absolutely shocked the division and created massive controversy among fighters and fans. Let me explain why this matchup is so divisive. Gaethje is a 37-year-old veteran with a 25-5 record who previously held interim lightweight gold in 2020 after beating Tony Ferguson before losing the unification to Khabib. He's known for his violent, fan-friendly style built around power shots and incredible toughness. Pimblett is a 30-year-old Liverpool native with a 21-3 record who stayed perfect in the UFC with 6 straight wins. His entertaining personality mixed with solid grappling and improving striking has made him one of the sport's most divisive personalities. Here's what's really controversial though. Arman Tsarukyan, who everyone considers the clear #1 contender after dominant performances including wins over Charles Oliveira and a recent submission of Dan Hooker, got completely ignored for this title shot, and he's furious about it. Tsarukyan has been vocal about his frustration, claiming this interim booking was planned specifically to push Pimblett for a future grudge match with Topuria. He's publicly stated they want to make Pimblett a star because they know he could beat everyone. Even more interesting, Pimblett has been warning that Topuria might be forced to give up the title completely if his absence goes into summer 20. Helwani directly addressed this possibility and speculated about when the UFC might have to make that decision.
Did he vacate the belt, or did you guys say, if you're moving to lightweight, then we don't want to hold up the featherweight division?
No, he did that. He said, I've done everything I can do here. I'm ready to move up. And he vacated it. He said, I shouldn't be holding up anybody's opportunities. And, you know, it's always, I respect when guys do that.
This timing is absolutely critical. Topuria's last fight was his title-winning performance against Charles Oliveira at UFC 317 in June 2025, so a summer 2026 return would mean roughly 1 full year away. The UFC's unofficial policy expects champions to defend their belts at least once every 12-18 months or face being stripped. What's even more fascinating is what Topuria has hinted about his future intentions. Reports suggest Topuria has indicated that if Gaethje wins the interim title, he might actually give up his belt voluntarily and challenge Islam Makhachev at welterweight instead of unifying. One analyst broke down exactly what Topuria said about the UFC having different plans if Gaethje comes out on top.
Topuria has felt like he's done all that he can in that division, and he feels like he's cemented his legacy, and his body cannot make the weight anymore. So Topuria will be moving up to 155 pounds and will be vacating the featherweight title.
This has convinced many people that Topuria's main interest is fighting Pimblett, not necessarily the most deserving challenger. The bad blood between Topuria and Pimblett goes back to their heated confrontation at UFC 317, where Topuria physically shoved Pimblett during an in-cage altercation after his Oliveira knockout. Let me give you some historical context for how the UFC typically handles these situations. When Conor McGregor became the first simultaneous two-division champion in November 2016, the UFC stripped his featherweight title just 1 month later when he showed no interest in defending it. His lightweight title lasted until April 2018, when after over 500 days of inactivity, they stripped him and made Khabib the undisputed champion. This connects to something important about Topuria's history with giving up title. When he vacated his featherweight belt in February 2025, Dana White made it clear it was entirely Topuria's choice and not something the UFC forced. In February 2025, Topuria willingly gave up his featherweight championship to chase the lightweight title. He explained that the brutal weight cuts were his main reason, saying that walking around at 80 and 90 pounds made dropping to 145 increasingly impossible to sustain. One expert summarized the situation perfectly.
But this is the most damning part. Don't be surprised if Topuria says goodbye to MMA. I don't think I'll stay in MMA too long. It's no secret I always wanted to go and test my skills in boxing. I wanted to finish my story in MMA first. I'll make my transition to boxing, and I'm going to surprise a lot of people. I mean, we kind of knew this. Topuria's been talking about this forever. He's been saying, I'm taking the Conor McGregor route.
He captured the vacant lightweight title at UFC 317 on June 28, 2025, destroying Charles Oliveira in the opening round. That victory made him the 10th fighter in UFC history to hold belts in 2 different weight classes and the first undefeated fighter to reach 2-division champion status. But now, with Topuria sidelined indefinitely and an interim title fight approaching, everyone wants to know if the lightweight champion will ever come back to defend his belt or if he has bigger plans that could take him completely away from MMA.
Ilia Topuria saying that he wants to go into boxing and just completely be done with MMA soon, yeah, that's a little bit worrying. First of all, Ilia is not going to be a world-level championship boxer. I hate to break it to you. I know I'm an MMA fan, but at the end of the day, boxers are so good at what they do because they master the sweet spot science. They master the sport of boxing. They spend their entire lives just boxing, whereas Ilia boxes, kicks, wrestles, does jiu-jitsu, elbows, knees. There is so much that goes into MMA that you don't have the time to focus on just one martial art.
Now let's address what everyone's thinking. What does the future look like for Ilia Topuria? And will we actually see him compete again? This answer is way more complex than you might expect, because based on recent interviews and statements, Topuria has made it obvious that his MMA career has an expiration date. In fact, he's openly talked about wanting to move into professional boxing as soon as possible.
He has openly said, I plan to retire between the ages of 30 and 32. I want my first defense to be October or November. It ended up being October. And he wants to retire between the age of 30, 32. So essentially, he's already 29. He only plans on fighting Paddy if Paddy beats Justin Gaethje. Best case scenario, he fights Paddy in maybe July, I would say. That'd be the best case scenario. So now he's halfway to 30, and he says he wants to retire around 30, 32. Well, does that include boxing?
Let me explain what Topuria's long-term strategy seems to be. After winning the lightweight title at UFC 317, Topuria immediately started pushing for a super fight with Islam Makhachev, who had just given up the lightweight belt to move to welterweight. Topuria pitched this potential fight as a legacy-defining Triple Crown achievement, making him the first UFC fighter in history to win titles in 3 weight classes. When Makhachev successfully captured the welterweight title in November 2025 with a dominant decision over Jack Della Maddalena at UFC 322, Topuria intensified his callouts, publicly criticizing the performance as boring and emotionless, while confidently predicting he would knock Makhachev unconscious. But alongside these MMA goals, Topuria has increasingly talked about leaving the sport to pursue boxing. In a December 2025 interview with Marca, he plainly stated his MMA career wouldn't last much longer, explaining his philosophy of not chasing 2 goals at once, meaning he plans to completely finish his UFC story before focusing exclusively on boxing. Not everyone thinks this boxing transition will work out. One expert was brutally honest about the challenges Topuria would face trying to compete at the elite levels of professional boxing.
That you'll fight in January. When would you like to fight? When you feel it's time to return? Well, Ilia says, as I've communicated, I'm going through some personal problems. I do not have an exact date when everything will be fixed. I hope that as soon as possible, as soon as it is solved, I will be ready to go back. In the octagon, I prioritize at this time the welfare of my family, of my children, my own. So as soon as everything is solved, I will be back to the octagon to give it the show.
The consequences of Topuria's boxing dreams are massive. Topuria has publicly said he plans to retire between ages 30 and 32. He's currently 28, turning 29 in just a few weeks. If you calculate this timeline, we might only see 2 or 3 more fights from Topuria maximum before he walks away from the octagon forever. One commentator explained the harsh reality of this timeline.
Actually, I met my wife in Miami.
Really?
Yeah, she was living there.
Damn. Who says you can't meet your wife in Miami?
But you can find your wife in any place in the world.
You hear that? Put that on Only in Date on Instagram. You can meet your wife in Miami.
Alright, that's right.
Put it on Only in Date is hilarious.
Every year. But why are you saying that?
Huh?
Why are you saying that?
Everyone says that.
Because you go to the party and this is the only...
Now let's discuss what this means for Topuria's legacy and the lightweight division's future. As of late November 2025, Topuria ranked number 2 in the UFC men's pound-for-pound rankings, only behind welterweight champion Islam Makhachev. He briefly held the top position after his spectacular knockout of Oliveira at UFC 317. His legacy as the 10th 2-division champion with a perfect 17-0 record and spectacular finishes over Volkanovski, Holloway, and Oliveira remains elite level. However, having 0 lightweight defenses opens him up to criticism about being a paper champion, potentially damaging his reign compared to multi-defense legends. The mental impact of this situation can't be overlooked either. While Topuria hasn't specifically mentioned depression or anxiety, the language in his statements suggests significant emotional stress. The pressure of protecting his children while fighting what he calls manipulated stories has clearly affected his ability to concentrate on fighting. When asked about his return timeline, Topuria made it obvious that his family comes first, and he has no specific date for when he'll be back.
I would bet my life the best case scenario for Ilia Topuria would be 2 more fights, maybe 3. I'd be shocked if we got 3 more fights from Ilia Topuria, unless he were to somehow lose, like a fluke injury or something. If he goes out there, if you fight, let's say Paddy beats Justin Gaethje, I'm predicting Paddy to win right now. So hypothetically, Paddy beats Gaethje, Topuria fights Paddy mid-2026, which is already a disgrace that we got to wait over a year for that fight to happen. Who's he going to fight after that? He's not fighting Arman. Dana White has already made that quite clear. It's already a sham belt. we're not fighting the number one contender, then I think he's going to probably try to get the Islam fight. Maybe that happens, maybe it doesn't.
The situation reminds people of other UFC fighters who've paused their careers for personal reasons. Sean O'Malley announced a complete break in September 2024 after losing his title to Merab Dvalishvili at UFC 306, saying he needed to mentally recharge after an intense bantamweight championship run. Then there's that Nelk Boys clip that keeps getting brought up in discussions about Topuria's marriage problems. During an interview, Topuria mentioned meeting his wife in Miami, and the Nelk Boys' reaction created an incredibly awkward moment that many now see as a warning sign.
I'll tell you guys this right now. To quote Dean Thomas, Ilia Topuria is a disaster for the lightweight division. I hope that I'm wrong. I hope something changes.
Many people point to this uncomfortable exchange as proof that red flags about Topuria's relationship might have been obvious for a while, and the current situation was maybe unavoidable. So, what happens next? Topuria's return timeline stays locked to no activity through the first quarter of 2026, with the second quarter starting in April as the earliest realistic possibility. If his legal issues drag beyond 12-18 months from his June 2025 last fight, forced vacancy becomes likely, promoting the interim winner to undisputed champion and Kemplin changing contender rankings. The harsh truth is that even in the best-case scenario, we're looking at very few fights left in Topuria's MMA career. One analyst summarized the situation with a devastating evaluation. And maybe the most brutal assessment came at the end of that same breakdown, where the analyst held nothing back about what Topuria's absence means for the division. The reality is this. We're watching what could be the beginning of the end for one of the most gifted fighters to ever enter the octagon. Whether Topuria comes out of these legal battles, cleared or not, the damage to his career path is obvious. The lightweight division sits in uncertainty. Contenders are angry, and fans are wondering if they'll ever see the undefeated champion fight again. As Topuria wrote in his statement, truth doesn't need volume, it needs facts. Only time will show what those facts uncover, and whether Ilia Topuria will ever return to defend the championship he worked so hard to win.